I was perched at the corner of my high-rise office, the sunlight spilling over the glass walls and catching the gold threads in my blouse. The city below moved like a restless river, indifferent, as if nothing had the power to shake it. I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the warmth, pretending the day was ordinary, though I knew it wasn't. Ordinary had left my life years ago, after I'd made a choice that had cost me everything but my dignity. Then my phone buzzed. A message. From home. From her. My mother. "You're just the spare child, meant to fund his future. Pay what you owe." The words froze me mid-breath. I ran my hand along the silk of my sleeve, smooth and comforting, trying to steady the tremor in my chest. The old sting, the one I thought I had buried, flared up like wildfire. Pride warred with resentment, and a touch of irony curled in my stomach. How predictable. How painfully familiar. I glanced out the window at the skyline, imagining the life I had built, my own rules, my own successes, none of them hers to control. And yet, in that moment, I remembered the years she had tried to shape me into a wallet, a footnote in someone else's story. I took a deep breath, tapping my phone to reply. But my fingers hovered over the screen. Not yet. I needed more than words. I needed power. This was the moment the past collided with the present, the moment a long-buried fire awakened. And I knew, somehow, that it would all come to a reckoning. I was 18, standing in the kitchen of our modest suburban home, my hands trembling as I held the checkbook my mother had thrust at me. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, cold and harsh, making the room feel smaller than it had ever been. My father sat at the table, quietly shuffling papers, as if my presence had nothing to do with him. "You're just the spare child, Sophie," my mother snapped, her eyes sharp and unforgiving. "Your brother's future comes first. You exist to pay for it." The words hit harder than any slap could. My stomach twisted. I had worked all summer babysitting, tutoring kids, saving every dime to help with my college tuition, and this was what I got. My chest felt tight, like someone had tied a cord around it, and the lump in my throat refused to go down. I can't," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I can't give him more. I've already." "Don't argue," she cut me off. "It's your responsibility." I wanted to scream, to throw something, to vanish into the floorboards, but all I could do was stare at her. And then I saw it, my grandmother's old locket sitting on the counter, the one she had given me on my last birthday before she passed. She had told me once, her frail hands pressed over mine, "Sophie, you're stronger than they'll ever believe. Never let anyone decide your worth." I clenched the locket in my hand, the metal cool against my palm. That tiny object felt like a shield, a promise. And in that moment I made a choice. I would not be the spare. I would not be the fund for someone else's dreams. I would fight for my own. With a trembling exhale, I set the checkbook back on the counter. "I'm going to figure this out myself," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My mother's jaw tightened, my father's eyes widened in surprise, but I didn't look back. I turned, leaving the kitchen, leaving their expectations, leaving the life they had designed for me. That day, I stepped into independence, awkward, uncertain, and terrifying, but also electric with possibility. And for the first time, I felt like I belonged to myself. I moved to the city with nothing but a suitcase, my grandmother's locket tucked under my blouse, and a determination that felt bigger than the fear thrumming through my chest. My first apartment was tiny, a shoebox with peeling wallpaper and a faucet that dripped incessantly. But I loved it. For the first time, the space belonged to me entirely. I took a job at a small marketing firm, working long hours for little pay. The office smelled of burnt coffee and recycled paper, the hum of fluorescent lights a constant companion. My colleagues were kind enough, but many dismissed me quietly, seeing only the girl who came from nowhere, who had no pedigree, no connections. I often stayed late, teaching myself graphic design, digital analytics, and the subtle art of persuasion. Every keystroke, every late-night email, every client pitch felt like a brick in the foundation I was quietly building. It was during one of these nights that I met Claire Donovan, a seasoned strategist in the firm, who noticed my persistence. "You have an eye for more than just the numbers, Sophie," she said one evening, leaning against the doorway of my cubicle. "You should think bigger." Her encouragement was like sunlight breaking through a storm. She became my mentor, sometimes blunt, sometimes brutally honest, but always unwavering. She taught me to negotiate, to pitch boldly, to value my own ideas. There were countless setbacks. A major client rejected my proposal. A campaign I'd labored over for weeks failed. I cried more times than I can count, the city's skyline mocking me through my apartment window. But each failure only hardened my resolve. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, I started to see results. My first successful campaign brought in enough profit to rent a better apartment. The next client doubled that. Each win, no matter how small, was a secret triumph over the life I had left behind. I began to invest wisely, quietly, building a nest egg while still wearing the guise of a struggling junior associate whenever family checked in. They saw a girl scraping by. They didn't know I had started my own consultancy on the side, one that was quietly gaining traction with high-profile clients who valued innovation over nepotism. Evenings became my sacred time, sketching ideas, negotiating contracts, learning from online courses. I found joy in the quiet victories. My first positive review from a client, a thank you email from someone I helped launch a product, a small deposit hitting my account that confirmed I was no longer reliant on anyone. Every night, I touched my grandmother's locket, letting the reminder of her words fuel the fire. I was no longer the spare child. I was Sophie Reynolds, building an empire under the radar, preparing for a day when the world and my family would see me. The doorbell rang sharply, pulling me from my desk where I was reviewing a new client proposal. My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with anticipation. I knew exactly who it was. My mother, and likely my father trailing behind, expecting to see the struggling girl they had dismissed so easily. I smoothed my blazer and took a deep breath, letting the soft scent of vanilla from the candles I'd lit mingle with the faint aroma of polished wood. The apartment, my sanctuary, was now also a testament to years of painstaking effort. The walls displayed framed certifications, awards, and abstract art I had collected on travels funded by my own earnings. My office, neatly organized, held the quiet power of someone who had carved a life from nothing. They stepped in, eyes immediately scanning the space. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. My father's hands fidgeted nervously. Their silence was deafening. I thought you were still struggling?" My mother finally managed, her voice a mixture of disbelief and hesitation. I smiled calmly, walking toward them with measured steps. The locket rested under my blouse, warm against my skin, a reminder of the woman I had become. "Struggling?" I echoed, letting the word linger. "I don't think you'll call it that anymore." I led them into my office. Claire Donovan's influence was evident even here. My workspace radiated efficiency and elegance. I gestured toward the framed contracts and client letters lining the walls. "This," I said softly, "is everything I've built. On my own." My father's eyes widened as he noticed the portfolio of high-profile clients, the neatly stacked financial reports showing steady, exponential growth, and the strategic plans detailing projects they had never imagined I could lead. My mother's hand hovered near her mouth, disbelief etching lines deeper than years could have. "You own your own consultancy," my father whispered, almost to himself. "I do," I confirmed. "And it's profitable. Every client, every contract, every campaign, my name, my vision, my work. No help, no loans, no exploitation of anyone else's future." My mother's face flushed with shame and recognition. She opened her mouth, but no words came. I let the silence hang, thick and heavy, giving them a chance to absorb the reality. I could see the past confrontations flicker in their eyes, their memory of me as the spare child, the girl meant to fund my brother's dreams. Now, standing here, I was undeniable. "I'm not here to punish you," I continued, my voice calm but firm. But I am here to set the record straight. I am not your backup plan. I am not your funding source. I am Sophie Reynolds. And this, I gestured around, is my life. One I built for myself. They looked at each other, then back at me. My mother's eyes glistened with a mixture of guilt and awe, my father's with silent admiration. For the first time, the power dynamic had shifted. The little girl they had underestimated had grown into a woman whose success could not be ignored, dismissed, or controlled. And for the first time, I felt the sweet, quiet satisfaction of being truly seen, on my own terms. I let them absorb the weight of my words, watching the realization settle in. For years, they had held power over me, dictating how I should live, how I should sacrifice. Now the tables had turned. I was calm, composed, and fully in command. I want to be clear, I said, pacing slowly in my office. I am willing to help, but it comes with conditions. Conditions that matter, both to you and to me. My mother blinked, hesitant. Conditions? Yes, I said firmly. If you want me in your life, it has to be on a foundation of respect and accountability. No more expectations that I exist to finance someone else's dreams. No more undermining my choices or dismissing my worth. I handed them each a sheet of paper I had prepared, a clear outline of what I expected. For my mother, she had to acknowledge her role in my past, commit to attending therapy, and start pursuing her own interests outside the family hierarchy. For my father, he needed to stop enabling favoritism, to mentor rather than dictate, and to support my autonomy without judgment. For both of them, weekly honest conversations without blame, listening without interrupting, and respect for boundaries. This isn't punishment, I said, looking each of them in the eye. It's a chance to rebuild, to grow. I care about you, but I will not compromise myself again. I could see the hesitation, the resistance, but also the faint glimmers of hope. My mother's lips quivered, a silent admission that she understood. My father nodded slowly, the lines of guilt softening as he realized I wasn't asking for loyalty, I was demanding mutual respect. And for me, I added, softer now, letting the warmth of my voice carry the truth, I get to live free of guilt. I get to be proud of the life I built without bending to old patterns. This is non-negotiable. I paused, letting the silence linger. Then, finally, I smiled. If you're willing to try, I'll guide you. But only if you're willing to meet me halfway. It wasn't an ultimatum. It was a bridge. A chance for healing that didn't come at the cost of my independence. I had learned that power wasn't about revenge. It was about setting boundaries, protecting yourself, and extending compassion where it mattered. For the first time, I felt the full weight of the shift. The girl they had dismissed, the one who had been considered spare, was now the center. The fulcrum on which change rested. And I was ready, not only to succeed, but to redefine the very relationships that had once tried to contain me. As they sat in stunned silence, absorbing both my words and the life I had built, I knew this was the turning point. Not just for them, but for me. For the first time, I could offer love without compromise, guidance without submission, and respect without forfeiting my self-worth. Weeks passed, and subtle changes began to appear. My mother enrolled in a pottery class she had always wanted to try, her eyes brighter with each finished piece. She sent me photos of her work, a quiet acknowledgement that she was building her own world, not just trying to manage mine. My father started mentoring one of his younger colleagues at work, sharing his experience, without imposing it on anyone. He called me once, hesitant, to ask for advice on a client strategy, not as my superior, not as a parent controlling me, but as someone genuinely curious about my perspective. I smiled at the call, realizing the barriers between us were shifting. Our weekly conversations, once tense and filled with resentment, became spaces for honest dialogue. No accusations, no guilt, just understanding, curiosity, and a willingness to meet halfway. I noticed the small gestures. My mother waiting for me to finish a story before interrupting, my father nodding instead of lecturing. Each moment was a tiny victory, a sign that the power dynamics had changed, permanently. I sat one evening by my office window, the city lights glittering like a sea of stars. My grandmother's locket rested in my palm, warm and familiar. I remembered her words, "Never let anyone decide your worth." They had been my shield, my compass, my quiet rebellion. Now, holding it, I realized they had also been my promise to myself, to live fully, freely, and on my own terms. The woman I had been, the insecure, overlooked, spare child, felt like a distant memory. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and fiercely independent. And yet, she had not hardened into bitterness. She had grown into grace, compassion, and an unshakable sense of self-worth. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly, savoring the moment of quiet triumph. This was not just about money, success, or proving anyone wrong. It was about being seen, being respected, and reclaiming my story. And as I opened my eyes, looking at the skyline, the locket still clasped in my hand, I whispered to myself, softly but firmly, the words that had carried me through every doubt, every setback, every fight. I am not anyone's spare. I am Sophie Reynolds, and my life is mine alone.